Angie Chappell, and with me presenting will be Barb Seferis. We'll introduce ourselves a little bit more in just a minute. And this is presented through the Family Resource Network of Ohio. And it is funded and sponsored by Family Resource Network of Ohio, the Department of Developmental Disabilities, and the Department of Education and Workforce. And through that funding, we are able to share these wonderful trainings and presentations and information and resources for free. And if you have not yet already, I would encourage you to sign up for the Family Resource Network of Ohio. Go here, you can sign up and get some email sent to you. And there's also a Facebook page. So if you are a Facebook person and you want to find out more about the Family Resource Network, there is a Facebook page with stories and lots of great information. So I encourage you to sign up for that as well. And also part of our team is Tracy Manns and Erica Young. They are both ambassadors and project coordinators and managers. Erica is on the call today, so Erica will be here to help support us and make sure that you get all your handouts, and all the information will be dropped into the chat as we go. So keep watching the chat. So Erica will be dropping handouts in there. She will be putting links. If you have questions, we'll be monitoring that chat as well. So keep an eye on that. Excuse me. And so, as I said, this is me. I'm Angie, and I am, along with many other things, one of my favorite things is that I'm a sibling. So I'm the sibling to Dave, my brother Ed, our brother Ed. He passed away not too long ago, but I still have Dave. So Dave is my brother. He has cerebral palsy, and I have been hanging out with Dave forever. So we've lived together. We are best friends. We hang out a lot. As you can see, we've spent a lot of time together since we were very young. I also am the mom to Nathan. So Nathan is over here in this picture. That's my Nathan. And that's my brother's wife. And I also take care of my dad. He lives here with me. I've been working as an educator in the disability field for 33 years. This is year 33 for me, and this is my retirement year from that realm, but I've been in this realm for many years, as you can see. My first job was as a job coach, and it was fun. I'm also a Charting the Life Course ambassador, and I am also working with the Family Resource Network of Ohio as well, and I am an adjunct professor. And so that's me. Come on, move. And here's Barb. So I'm going to let Barb take over for a moment, and she can introduce herself.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Angie. I am also a sibling. I am Nick's big sister. So I have lived with as a family member for more years than I want to count. But professionally, this is my 50th year working with people with disabilities and their families. Some of my former coworkers from Cuyahoga County Board of DD are on the call, and I was fortunate to support people in all settings. So I worked in the schools, I supported people at home, I supported people in their job settings and also in their day programs, and have been a family caregiver for several family members, unpaid, for most of my life. And I also am an ambassador. I am a mentor trainer in person-centered thinking and a member of the National Charting the Life Course team out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Barb. And I also just want to make sure everyone is aware that we are recording this session. So that you should have got a little pop-up that said that we are recording. So just want to make sure that you have seen that and you are aware. And also that there will be one CEU available as long as you stay on for the hour. Okay, so and it's kind of tracked through Zoom. So if you stay on for that hour, at the end you'll have a link to be able to fill out a form, and that will make sure that you get your CEU. So just be aware of that, so you can get one CEU, and it is being recorded.
And Angie, excuse me, it's Barb. Also, if anyone has questions, we will be monitoring chat along with Erica. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in chat.
And also, Barb and Angie, can I include that this is the same series? So if you attended last week,
Thanks.
it's going to be the same exact content as well, everyone. So it's also going to be if you're sorry, if you're wanting another CEU for this course, again, just so you know, it's going to be the same code or same, ID number. So it's not worth staying on this call for the same CEU as well. Just FYI, same
Oh,
content.
it's worth staying on just to listen
It's
to
worth
us.
staying on. So if you want to hear it all again, you're more than welcome to. And you can also have a personal recording of it as well. So you're more than welcome to attend and listen again.
Thanks, Erica. All kinds of ways to keep hearing us. All right, so let's get going here. So here's our outcomes. So I know it's been up on the screen for a minute, so I'm sure you've had a chance to read that a little bit through. But we're going to share some resources. We're going to talk about having those conversations and planning and envisioning that plan for work, for employment across the lifespan. And we're going to talk about this across the lifespan because planning for employment, planning for work, planning for future doesn't start at age 14. It starts right away. This should be happening in preschool, right? So we're going to talk about this across the lifespan, and we're going to share some different tools with you that can be used by families, professionals, students, everybody, okay? Excuse me. So these are the handouts that we had spoken about earlier. Eric, I'll have these in the chat for you so you can make sure that you can download those. So you'll have a copy, a PDF of the PowerPoint. You'll have a experiences in question booklet, the exploring employment portfolio, and the planning employment portfolio. Okay, so they're two different things, so make sure you have both of those. And then the employment guide. Okay, just make sure you're muted, okay? So make sure your mic is muted, unless you want to share something. Okay, so let's start off just by making sure that we are kind of all on the same page when it comes to the language that we're using and some definitions, okay? So, excuse me. So when we talk about work, there are two different definitions of work. There's a legal definition and a federal definition of work. So that federal definition is that's work that you're paid for. Okay, so it's doing a service and you get paid. There's a reimbursement for it. But the legal definition of work is it could be anything where you're performing a service. So it could be volunteering, it could be working, some paid employment, it could be a service, but it's something that benefits the individual. Okay, so there's two different ways of looking at work. Employment, on the other hand, that is paid. That's paid work by an employer. So when we talk employment, there's an employer, there's money. And then the workforce, and this is the one I like the best to kind of really spend time thinking about, is that the workforce isn't just people who are actually engaged in work at the moment. It's also people who are available to work. It means that they can work, they are ready to work, they want to work, they are, even if they don't want to work, they are available, right? So it's that idea that you can work, but even if you are not working at the moment. I guess the allergies are getting to me again today. I apologize. So secondary transition planning is kind of like how we start to think about that workforce development in Ohio. And it starts at age 14 in Ohio. Federally, it's at age 16. Some states start at 12. Some states are 14, 16. It varies across the states, but in Ohio, it is age 14. And during the transition planning process, we start to talk to individuals, we start to talk to students about kind of where do they see themselves in the future? Where do they see themselves post-school in regards to employment, education, and independent living? And we start this off by doing some assessment to discover preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. Okay, so those preferences, interests, needs, and strengths are what guide the rest of the transition process. Okay, so it's about getting that information, hearing the voice of the individual. Okay, that's really important. It's not just about what somebody else wants or their preference, it's what that individual wants, that will lead them to the outcomes that they want. All right, and so that independent living, so real quick, that independence, when we talk independence, we're not really talking about just independent, doing things by yourself, because none of us are that independent. I mean, well, you know, there's probably some people that are living off the grid that maybe are, but, you know, for the most part, we're not independent. We depend on other people. So as Judy Heumann says, independent living is not doing things by yourself. It is being in control of how things are done. So it's about, if I need help, I can ask somebody, as opposed to somebody doing it to me or for me without my consent. Okay, that's what independence is. And we often use the term interdependent instead of independent. So that interdependent means it kind of goes back and forth. I help you, you help me, we work together, we get things done. Okay, so employment. So we talked a little bit about that employment, that employment is that you have an employer, you know, that you are working. And it's an important part of being an adult, okay? Because that's how you earn money. That's how you can make friends. That's how you can make those social networks. That is how you have that sense of purpose. It is how you can make sure that you have the quality of life you want, because now you got money, so I can live where I want, I can buy what I want, I can have the car that I want, the clothes that I want, right? And that's part of that adult life. Excuse me. So when we think about that, that employment is important, because that employment helps with that quality of life piece. And in Ohio, we are fortunate to be in Ohio, to be an employment first state. And so because we are an employment first state, we have there is support for this across Ohio. And so you see that Ohio's vision, working age adults are working and thriving in their careers. Okay, so you can see that this is about making sure that people are supported, people have what they need. Everybody, including people with significant disabilities, can and should have the opportunity to work in the community, right? I mean, that's what this is about. Okay, and by being an employment first state, Ohio is on board with this idea that everyone should be able to have the opportunity to work. Okay, so just some things to consider. Everybody has a vision for work. Sometimes that vision may be that you don't want to work. That's still a vision. Okay, so everybody has a vision, and it happens from an early age. And it's, we need to start talking about it at an early age. We don't necessarily know what we want to do as far as work goes, outside of what we've been exposed to, which is why we need to start talking early, because the more exposure we get, the more opportunities there are, the more chances there are to broaden that scope of what it means to work, and what types of jobs that we can have. Employment does not necessarily mean 40 hours a week. Okay, it could be 20 hours a week, it could be 2 hours a day. It is work. Okay, employment is different for everybody, and different people may want different things, and different people may need different things. Excuse me. It is not the end. Okay, so it's not like, it is not like you graduate from high school and you have this job, you're done. That's there. You're going to be there forever. No, it's about preparing for the rest of your life, right? So there's more things that can come. You may need it, you have one job, but you may not have enough to do all the things you want to have that quality of life you want. You may have to have a better job. You may have to have 2 jobs. You have to work more hours. Okay, so just having that one thing is that doesn't mean you have that job, you're done, because I would imagine that very few, if any, people that are on this call are in the same job that they started with. Okay, when your very first job, I know I'm not in my very first job, you're probably not in that job anymore, right? And so it's that idea that, we want to make sure that we are preparing folks to be able to move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's not just that job done, okay? Excuse me. Come on. My slides aren't advancing. There we go. Sorry about that. So as I said, we start talking about employment, and we start talking about work and all of this at a very early age. We start talking about it at early childhood. Okay, so when we talk about the stages of of life, right? So we have the life stages that start at early childhood and go to, as someone said, to 100. Or I heard yesterday someone said, like from 14 to gray. I loved that one too, so it's like to gray. So whatever it is, from being very young to being very old, we talk about employment throughout that. And so those are those life stages. And we have the life domains within the Charting the Life Course framework. And there are two domains that kind of relate to this work and employment. And those two are the daily life and employment domain and the social and spirituality. Because remember, on the couple slides ago, I had said that one of the things about work is that we not only do we get to make money, but we also have those social experiences at work. We make friends at work. Okay, so we're going to think about this across the lifespan and across multiple domains. Okay, so and as a reminder, if you are unfamiliar with the life domains, you can get familiar with them real quick, and they're also in some of the resources that we've given you. But those life domains, there are 6 life domains within Charting the Life Course. Okay, so these are the domains, and we're going to focus on that daily life and employment and that social and spirituality. Okay. Okay, well, we're going to talk about all of them, but we're going to focus on those. Okay. So let's start with early childhood. Okay, so within the early childhood, when we start to have these conversations and we're thinking about employment and we're thinking about that future plan and, moving beyond school into adulthood and post-school and to gray, we start at early childhood. So within those domains, so within that daily life and employment domain, we start by, when we give kids opportunities to make choices, that is a big piece of employment, right? Being able to make choices. You choose your job, you choose your setting, you choose what you wear to work, you choose your friends, right? There's a lot of choices that happen within that daily living and employment realm. Communication, huge. Interactions. How do you talk to people? Responsibility. All of those pieces start at early childhood, and then within that social and spirituality, it's just learning those social skills, taking turns, right? We always say those things you learned in kindergarten, taking turns, sharing, all of those things happen. That's how you get to be around people. That's how you get to be social. And that spirituality piece is that connectedness, right? So you get to know people. If you build a community, you start to know who to depend on, that interdependence. It all starts very young. Okay, then when we get into school age, when we start to think about that least restrictive environment, because now we're moving into kindergarten, first, second, third, through middle school. When we have kids that are separated and secluded and put off someplace else, it's not preparing kids to be ready to be in an integrated setting. So that least restrictive, try that again. Least restrictive environment is really important to start thinking about at a very early age, and then thinking about how you're going to continue to keep it moving in a good direction as kids get older. Again, still continuing with that, with communications and making choices, and starting to talk about what do you want to be when you grow up. Okay, we start to have those conversations, and kids get asked that all the time by everybody. What do you want to be when you grow up? So start giving kids opportunities to think about what those things could be. Show them examples of different things than what they're traditionally used to, or maybe what they know just from their family and their small community, right? And then the social and spirituality, again, more time to make friends. Now we might have friends we're hanging out with outside of school. We're joining clubs, we're playing sports. We might be doing activities at our church, okay? So all of that starts to happen through that school age. And then into adulthood, from transition age, so that 14 post-school, now this could be, moving into, becoming an adult. So now we do start that very formal transition planning, right? This is where we're starting to talk about those preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. We're pulling in information about what people like to do, their hobbies, their skills, and how can those lead to a different job, or how can those lead to building the skills to get a job that they want. We're bringing in other agencies. So maybe we're bringing in the county board, or we're bringing in OOD. In Ohio, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities is the VR. So I don't know if there's anyone on the call that's outside of Ohio, but that's what we call our VR services in Ohio. Yeah, so we're taking on more responsibility, maybe getting that part-time job now. Okay, maybe starting moving into the actual employment realm. And in the social, spiritual, this is where we might start to have those conversations around different types of relationships. That we're talking about dating and intimacy. And it's an important conversation to have, right? Because it's a big piece of life as an adult, and it is important to have the conversations around it. And again, just continuing with more with the just building all the other relationships. And then into adulthood, that into the gray. So now within the work realm, maybe I want, think about how do I want to ride off into the sunset, right? So now we're thinking about, do I want to keep working? Do I want to keep in this job? Do I want to learn something new? Do I want to try something different? Do I want to have a business? Have I made enough money? Do I need to keep working? Maybe we're thinking about retirement, or how am I going to support myself when I'm done working? And then in the social, just continuing to maintain those relationships. Again, we want to bring in those intimate relationships as well. That has to continue to happen. Okay. Oh, I was going to say one other thing here too, is that within that, that social piece, I think one of the other, I just have to throw this in here, that another thing that's important to talk about is mortality, right? Because that happens. And so having those conversations about, some of your friends are going to not be here anymore. And so how are you going to manage that? All right. So one of the first, one of the handouts I'm going to call your attention to is this blue book. So it's the Experiences and Questions booklet. And you can find it. This is the kind of the cookie crumb trail that will lead you, or the breadcrumb trail that leads you to it on the LifeCourse Tools website. So you can go here to the library, you go to the Exploring Life Stages, it'll keep bouncing you down, and then you'll be able to find this there, but you also have it in the chat. So if you want to pull that out from the chat. And this document, this is what it looks like inside. It's like, wow, it's a lot of stuff, right? This is really cool though. So within these books, so you're going to see up on the top, there's your domain. So this is the daily life and employment. And there's your life stages across the top. Okay, so you have your domain within your life stages. And then all those areas that we just talked about, the education, the employment, and that, that independent living, or that it says individual and family life. So it's that, what does it look like for you to have your community, your family, your friends? Okay. And these are like guiding questions that help you to have that conversation. And remember, this is about the conversation. It's not about the form. It's not about the tool. It's not about, writing things in a particular place or in a particular way. This is about having the conversation and gathering information, helping the individual to be able to explore, helping the individual to be able to learn more about themselves and the world around them. Okay, so that's what these questions are about. And you see, there's a lot of questions. Okay, and they're there for each of the domains across the lifespan. Okay, so this one is the daily life. I'm sorry, I just have a cat jumping up here. Go away. Daily life and employment. Sorry. Okay, so I encourage you to take this out, look at it. You have a lot of really good questions. These can help you with transition planning. These can help you with, writing IEPs, ISPs, any of those Ps. These are great tools to help you with that. Okay, and there are these 4-page quick guides for each of those life stages. So you can look at them by life stage. So you can see there's the school age, the adult, all the ones that are there. Okay, and again, you can find those again on the LifeCourse Tools website. Okay, and I'm gonna turn it over to Barb now. So I'm gonna stop my share.
Thanks, Angie.
I think I'm gonna stop my share. There we go.
As we move forward, some things to remember. It doesn't matter what county you're in. It doesn't matter if you're not from Ohio. We're talking about best practices in employment and having the conversations to support people to move towards employment, or we're focusing on employment during this call. We know that employment looks different for everybody, but we want people to have The challenge for all of you, there are several of you that are in education, a county board, transition coordinators, employment specialists. We're so happy that you're all here. But what we want to do is really engage the person in the conversation and do some discovery. What experiences and opportunities have they had? What experiences and opportunities have we provided as professionals so people can make informed decisions about what they want to do during the day? So I will tell you that as a Greek American, I'm probably the only one who's never worked in a restaurant, and there is a good reason for that. I do not want to. I know that is not meeting, that is not a good fit for me. And as we talk about employment in the past, because I did say I've been here working in the field for 50 years, we need to move away from what's the 4 F's: food, flour, factory, and food, flour, factory. Uh-oh.
Filth.
Filth. Thank you, Bob. I'm like, what is the fourth one? And stop thinking about the typical jobs that have been available to really starting with what is this person's interest? What are their skills? What experiences and opportunities have they had? So we have 2 portfolios we want to share with you for employment from Charting the Life course. Again, it doesn't matter what county you're in. It doesn't matter what state you're from. These tools help you as family members or as professionals to gather information, empower people to be part of the conversation, and to take that information to develop the plan. So we have exploring versus planning. We have to start somewhere, and exploring, what do people want to do? Have they thought about, and a word that I love that I rarely hear professionals use or people with lived experience is career. And yet from the time I was a small child, I talked about I want to be a speech language pathologist. I want a career. So helping people see that a career is a possibility. And then planning, the planning trajectory and portfolio is what you can use when someone really has a vision or a picture of what they want to do. So let's look at these 2 portfolios and see how you can use them as you're facilitating conversation, but also to empower students, adults, families to be part of the conversation, to actually have these ahead of time for you to facilitate the conversation and then let them think about the information. So a portfolio in Charting the Life course has 3 tools on it. The first one is the 1-page description. Now, many of you have seen a 1-page. We talk about them. For several of us, it's our favorite tool. This is a little different. The 1-page, the typical one is, the first section is, what do people like and admire about you? Not what the person thinks about themselves, but also what do other people think about them? The blue section, the blue banner on this 1-page is, what am I good at? Or what am I interested in? Now, it's a little different because we're trying to see what might they want to do, what might they like. And so hopefully we're getting information about, maybe they like to work on the computer. They like being around animals. They like working with kids. The second section, that orange banner, is why is it important to work? And I'm going to advance. Yep, I thought so. I always forget to advance. So under what am I good at? Maybe what experiences they've had. They've dog walked. They've pet sat for neighbors. What opportunities have they had? Maybe they volunteered, maybe they volunteered at church or in other groups that maybe their families are involved in. Maybe they've been part of teams. And the reason we focus on the two domains, daily life and employment, and social and spirituality, is as many of you have had the experience, you know that we can teach people how to do a job. As a speech language pathologist, I can't tell you how many times I did task analysis and wrote picture boards for people to follow for how to do a job. But it's also important to have those social skills, how to interact with coworkers and how to engage in the culture of that workplace, because every workplace has a different culture. So what hobbies does someone have? Maybe they have talents, maybe they're artistic. One young man I know works for a nonprofit. He develops their social media and their flyers. Why? Because he's artistic. That's his talent. He's artistic, he's creative, and he knows software. Under why is it important to work? Now we're looking at what do people believe about work? I'm working with a group of families whose kids are in that transition age. And when I ask the parents, what is your son's vision and daughter's vision? They have no vision for work, but they want to buy expensive baseball cards and go on trips and buy electronics. And I'm like, okay, that's why it's important to work, to have money so you can buy the things you want. But also, do they have a sense of accomplishment? Work is important because we have work friends. A lot of us have developed our friendships through working. And then the third section, start to think about what help would I need or what supports what I need in finding out what kind of job I want. So are there people they can shadow? Have they watched videos? Or have they been exposed to different jobs? Can they mentor anyone? Think about, we have Bring Your Parents to Work Day, and they talk about what jobs they have. What kind of exposure have they had to different jobs? The second tool is the trajectory. Now, we always have the box, what's the good life and what do you want to avoid? But now it's a little different because we're asking people to think about what do you think you might want to do? So what's your vision for a good life? That's that in that top right box, the little corner on the top right. But also, what's your vision for a job or a career? And then, of course, we have to ask what people don't want. And this is where I've learned a lot about people, what they don't want in their life, but also what they don't want in their job. They don't want to be around noisy people. They don't want to be in a busy environment. They don't want to be where there's loud noises or where there's bright lights. And then over on the far left, the box above the line or the trajectory to a good life is what has helped. What have we done in the past? Have they job shadowed? Have they gone to work with a neighbor or a friend or a family member to see what it's like? And then what's gotten in the way? Maybe lack of experience, lack of opportunities, transportation. And then once they have a goal or they've thought about something they want to pursue, maybe they want to learn more about certain things, maybe they want to go shadow somebody, then looking at the integrated support stars and putting the goal in the center, and then looking at the 5 integrated support areas. What are the person's personal strengths and assets, the family's strengths and assets? And why is it important to look at the integrated support star? We want to start with personal strengths. We want to end with eligibility. And because we know that not all the supports can come from the publicly funded services and systems, that we need to be more broad. We need to look at what does the family bring? What does, the family may have friends who work in that field. Technology. Have they looked at YouTube videos? to see what the job truly is like. What technology can help them maybe learn or discover more. Relationships are unpaid people. So we're typically talking family, friends, neighbors. The bottom left, the kind of purpley section, what's in the community? You know, can they go volunteer maybe to go see what it's like? What resources are in the community? Job boards. I belong to a cultural community. In the church, there's always Post-it notes and signs up, do you want to, can anybody babysit, or can anybody take care of my dog for 2 weeks? It's a community. Where else can they go? And then eligibility supports. And now we're talking about the school, the county board, OOD opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, and perhaps other eligibility supports. So here is a starter star. You may be thinking, where do I start thinking about these resources? And this is also on charting on lifecoursetools.com under library, and then integrated support star. But here are things to think about, resources to think about, possibilities. So that was for people who are thinking about employment. They're not quite sure they want a job. They're not quite sure what they want to do, but really helping them discover their interests, their talents, because didn't we all fall into our jobs for some reason? Angie and I have already told you we're siblings, so it was almost a done deal. How many of you volunteered maybe in school working with kids with disabilities? I have met a lot of people who are in the field who got a job working at a camp when they were in high school or college. Somebody's a friend of mine who's actually a professor now at Case I said, how did you even get into this? And she goes, I met this guy at college and he said he was going to go work at a camp and said, you'd probably like it. And I did. And that's how my interest in disability, no family members, just a job opportunity. So helping people realize that they bring more to the conversation than maybe they're thinking. So now we've discovered somebody does have an interest. They do have some opportunities and experiences, and they've thought about a job. So now we can use this planning employment portfolio. Again, same 3 tools, 1 page, trajectory, integrated support star, but now the questions are different. So again, we have the 3 sections. I'm going to double check. I did do it. Okay. So now we're helping people think almost about developing a 1-page for a job interview. If they're planning to look for a job, helping them organize their thoughts. And a lot of people, a lot of agencies I've worked with, employment specialists have helped people develop their 1-page as part of their resume when they go looking for a job. They may never hand the paper over, they may, but it helps people organize their thoughts. So what qualities do I bring that someone may want to hire me? And these are not going to be qualities that people may like and admire about you as a friend. I always share that my brother my mother would always say your brother is ornery. We would not write ornery down on a 1-page description for looking for a job. But some things we might think about as, they're friendly, they're focused, they're punctual, they're helpful. And what other qualities? Maybe experience. What kind of jobs or work experience have I had or are going to have now? But thinking broadly, maybe they've had experiences at home. What have they done at home? Maybe they've learned how to cook. Maybe they know how to do um, uh, laundry. I worked with one young man who did not use words to communicate. I only heard him say two words. One was no, and one was mom. And but when I asked mom, what do you think he'd like to do during the day? He was finishing school. And so I started working with him a couple of months before school ended. And she said he's going to go to a day program. And I said, but he can get a job. Let's talk about what does he do at home? He cleaned. He was a real good cleaner. And so I said, that's a thing to think about. Would he want to work doing cleaning or dishes? He loved to do the dishes too. So think about, what do they do around the house? Do they cut the grass? Have they done gardening with flowers at home? Would they like to do an outdoor job? What kind of jobs have they had at school? Maybe they've done some things as part of a club at school. Maybe they've done data entry. Maybe they have done filing or whatever. And then what kind of job trials have they had? And again, let's not minimize the importance of volunteering. Yeah, I volunteer at my church. I can't tell you how many times students have come to us and said, how can I earn some of my service hours for high school? And so we have them volunteer, maybe working with the kids, maybe working on a camp program, or maybe working at our festival where they're preparing or serving food. They get the experience. And so what do I hear back from these kids? I call them kids. I never want to do this again. Or I really enjoyed this. So what kind of experiences and opportunities are we giving people? And then the last section, again, that last section is usually about support, but now we're breaking it down. What will help this person? So what help do I need to set a career or job goal and move toward it? What supports work and which ones don't? How do I learn best? And what helps me stay motivated? What's the best way to motivate me? And as we've reviewed, those of you that have attended other sessions, you've seen one pages that people have written for their employers. And you have seen what helps me is show me, tell me, watch me, and then tell me how I did, because I don't want to do things wrong. So the way to motivate is give me immediate feedback. For those of you working with students, 14 to 22, county board, you also, but education staff, that part of the transition process and the transition IEP is to help students identify their accommodations, the accommodations they need to be successful, not only in school, but after school. And that's what this third section of the one-page descriptions is, how to best support me. So helping them identify the accommodations that they need to be successful. Now, this employment trajectory is very different from any other trajectory that you will see. And what I love about it, what the big difference is, let me just go back, is first of all, you don't see an arrow with a line. You see steps. Why? Because this is a planning. This is, I want a job doing either this or this, and what are the steps that I need to take? So it's an actual visualization of action steps. On the far right, again, we always have a box for the vision and what I don't want. We always ask people, what is your vision of a good life? And so for some of these teenagers that these families have shared, the vision of their good life is that they have money to buy electronics and expensive baseball cards. And one mother said candy. I was like, okay, wants to buy candy. Okay, that's a good life. But then also there's three questions there. So what is my vision? What is a short-term goal? As Angie said, none of us are probably in our first job. In fact, your first job was probably chores around the house and chores maybe in the neighborhood. Maybe you babysat. Maybe you cut people's grass. Maybe you pet sat. Maybe you walked the dog. For some of you that are maybe in my generation, maybe you delivered the newspaper, that thing that people don't get delivered too much anymore. But maybe you did some chores in your neighborhood or at your home. So what is a short-term goal? You're not going to be in it for life, but do you want to try something? And then also thinking, what is my short-term goal? We all had short-term goals. We had to make money to get through school, to get a car, whatever. But that may not be what we ended up doing in the long term. So helping people see that just because you get a job doesn't mean it's the end. It's the beginning of your career. And we want you to reflect on, did it work or did it not work? And then what are some things that I can apply for? What are the job possibilities? And thinking about, do they want to work outside, inside? There are a lot of interest inventories that help you get to this, but this also, what I love about charting the life course is on 3 tools, you can get a pretty good plan. And it's not a lot of paper. I had when I was taking one mom and her son around to see different options. We went to see different job settings. And her judgment of whether it was a good fit for her son was whether if the staff talked to her and engaged with her. Her son did not use words to communicate. Her only concern was, I don't want him to ruin his clothes. And so, Barb, can he wear more like a uniform type clothes, work pants and a work shirt? And I turned to the employment person and said, can he wear work clothes? And they were like, of course he can. So even finding out something which I thought, oh my gosh, that would never have been my question, but that was her concern for her son. Will they talk to her and him? And can she get clothes for him that he doesn't ruin his nice clothes? Who would have thought? And then, of course, what I don't want. And I have heard people say what I don't want. I don't want to be in a loud environment. I don't want to be anywhere where there's lots of busyness, lots of movement, because that causes me to be anxious. I don't want to be with bright lights. And one friend of mine, her sister said, I don't want to be where it's busy. I don't want to be in where there's loud noises, and I don't want to be in bright lights. And where did the job coach take her for a job interview? Kroger. And the minute she was in those bright lights, she was like, I can't be here. And got very anxious. And they were like, we told you, no bright lights, no busy places. And then what steps do I need to take to get closer to my job goal? So maybe shadowing, maybe going and having a trial, maybe talking to people who work in that environment, and you can ask some questions. Think about when you changed jobs. Did you talk to anybody who worked there and ask them, what's it like? What's the supervision like? What's the culture of the workplace? And then things that might make it hard to get the job I want. Maybe there isn't one close to where you live. Maybe you have to depend on public transportation and there isn't any transportation. And then again, using the integrated support star, starting with what are the personal strengths and assets and the family's strengths and assets. And this is where you might find the person has a driver's license. That's a personal strength. Not only do they have a license, but they have access to a car. Maybe somebody, the family will provide the transportation. Maybe the person, I worked with one young man who rode his bike to work because he didn't want to wait for the bus. And he was safe. And, you know, he knew how to ride the bike. He knew how to get there. He was safe. He rode his bike to work. And then technology. Again, some people use Uber and they use the app. Some people can read the bus schedules. Some people use Waze if they drive. And this is a split star. So again, we're planning. We're going to move forward. We have a goal in mind. So you can identify what are the current supports, but also what are the supports that we need to look at in the future? You know, maybe we need to look at, maybe they can't use Uber, but maybe we need to look at, is Uber a possibility? And then relationships. Again, relationships are unpaid people. So this is not staff. This is not your teacher. This is not anyone who's paid, but do you know anybody? So one mom told me her son wanted to be a sports announcer and wanted a job at ESPN. And I asked her, has he ever done anything like that? You don't just walk into ESPN and say, here I am. You want to hire me? I'm good. And I said, do you know anybody who, you know, we live in Cleveland. Do you know anybody who works for any of the sports teams? And she said, Barb, we don't live in a place, you know, we don't live where the players live and the coaches. And then all of a sudden she stopped and went, oh my gosh, my neighbor across the street works for the Cavaliers. And I said, and she goes, I've never even talked to him about this. Maybe he can take your son for a tour, you know, maybe to go meet some people, see if there's a possibility. Maybe he can intern, maybe he can volunteer. The other thing I asked her was, do you know any coaches? And she said, oh my gosh, my other son was very active at high school. We are friends with the coach, the baseball, the football, and track. And I said, has your son ever volunteered at the high school? You said he knows stats, he knows how to look it up on the computer. Has he ever either volunteered or can he get paid for doing anything at the high school? So really think broadly, who do we know that might be able to help? And then what's in the community that anyone can find out about? You know, I always tell people, don't overlook those job boards at the community center or your church or your temple or your mosque, or even the wanted signs. You know, I had people who didn't want to take transportation and they just walked to the nearby stores and looked at anybody that had wanted signs. And then the eligibility supports. So again, we have the starter star. We also have included this employment guide. You don't have to read it, but it just has some ideas about how to have conversations, activities to think about. And just FYI, as Angie said, please sign up on frnohio.org to find out any other presentations we're doing. We are so excited that so many of you have attended this session and the one we did, I think, 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. We did one